We're live. We're live. How are you,
Hello.
Benita?
I'm well, thanks, Erica. How are you doing? Beautiful and
Yeah,
green.
thank you. I am doing well. I'm doing well. As you know, which listeners probably don't know, I've started back at university, and so I have been freshly being a uni student this morning, fresh out of a lecture. So that was fun. But yeah, no, I'm doing pretty well. How are you getting on today?
Yeah, I'm good. I had my strength session today in the gym this morning, so I'm still feeling the endorphins. I think are still running
Yes.
around. I'm quite energized. So, and that went well today. Um, I deadlifted 50 kgs. So I
Nice, nice.
love it. Yeah. So I'm pumped, literally.
Powerhouse. Yeah, that's right. Quite literally pumped.
Pumped.
Love it. Well, I'm also getting over a little bit of a cough, so apologies for that in advance. But we decided today we were going to talk about another book, which we've been doing a little bit recently here on Midlife Unfiltered, really trying to find books that we've both loved or one of us has loved that have something to do with being in midlife. And this book that we're going to talk about today is one that you recommended to me, and admittedly, I have not finished. But that is not reflective of the book. That is reflective of my brain. So I've read some of it, and you have read all of it multiple times, and we want to talk about it. So today we're going to be talking about this book called The Upgrade. I don't know if Dr. Louann Brizendine?
Yeah.
Brizendine?
Yeah, I'm unsure about the pronunciation. So, Luann, if you by any chance and miracle tune into this, we apologize if we mispronounce
Yes.
your surname. But
Yes.
by no means disrespectful, because you are a goddess to me in particular. I just think your work and your attitude is groundbreaking, and I absolutely love it and really appreciate everything that you've done. So, yeah, she's
Love
great.
that.
Mm.
Yeah, and I'm just reading on the front here, she's got another book called The Female Brain. Have you read that one?
No, I haven't read
No,
her female
me neither.
brain, and she's got another one, the male brain, as well. They came out before the upgrade.
Ah,
So the upgrade is the book, her third book that she released, and I
right.
do believe she's working on another one. So I look forward to getting that. But the
Yeah,
rest of the title, which is really empowering too, Erica, is how the female brain gets stronger and better in midlife and beyond.
yeah,
How friggin' refreshing is that? We are sold so much of this messaging, anti-aging, age defying, just be that little old lady in the corner that says nothing. And, it's just such bullshit. So I really appreciate this book for the very hopeful and powerful messaging in it.
yeah, I agree. And I must admit, as somebody who is, I think I'm probably perimenopausal, but like early, right? Because I still have a cycle. It's still pretty predictable. So I think I'm probably still pretty early in perimenopause. But my um, thoughts around menopause and my fears around menopause probably really do have centered around my brain and my mind and how I will be affected.
Mhm.
And that's what I've witnessed, around me at various stages in my life too, of, how you can't think straight and the brain fog and all of the things. And so when you recommended this book to me, I was like, this seems like a cool idea that perhaps there's strength that comes through that transition and through that process. So um, I think that's really quite remarkable. One of the things that we were just talking about before we hit record was something that you articulated really well, and you can jump in if I don't articulate it particularly well. But that's one of the things that she talks about in this book is changing our language, so that we are focused on this being a transition and being a phase of life that's really normal rather than being more medicalized, as you've sort of talked about in the past, this idea that sort of the menopause transition itself and the language around that is so laden with meaning. Do you want to say a little bit more about that? Because I think it's a really
Yeah.
interesting difference in this book that perhaps is quite unique.
Yeah. Well, language is everything. We've spoken about the importance of emotions and trying to use the right language to describe our emotions other than happy, sad, glad or whatever, the common four. And this is the same. So Louann very deliberately has reframed the language and the thinking as well so she calls what is medically and often referred to as the perimenopause years as the transition. And then post transition, she calls the upgrade. So she doesn't even mention the word menopause in any of that, which is, probably the medicalized, pharmacologicalized, if that's a word, aspect to it. And even just using the words transition and upgrade, you get a sense. It immediately makes me lift my shoulders up. And, I go, that's empowering language. It's not a
Yeah.
language that puts me, kind of in this ambiguous box and, pop a pill or whatever to get better. I find it really empowering. So,
Yeah. Do you know what it reminds me of? As you were talking then, I was thinking about the language around the crone archetype. Have you
mm,
ever kind of read a little bit about that?
no.
Where, various stages and crone actually doesn't sound that positive. But when you actually read about what it means, this idea of being like wise and kind of stepping into that time of life where you are so valuable because of your wisdom and experience. And I may be muddling that up in terms of the exact language, but it made me think of that, where we do have other ways of talking about sort of the mid to late stages of life as being ones of power and having sort of that feminine power that's embedded in that. But that typically isn't how we think of it in the West. And so I love that she speaks through that lens. When I opened the book again last night after we decided to talk about it today, um, there's like a little inscription right at the start. You know how sometimes there'll be like a little quote or a little saying, and what she's written at the very front of the book is never stop trying to solve the puzzle of your life. Engage until the very end. And I was like, oh, I love that so much, because I think it really speaks to this idea of identity that we often talk about, and how, like you just so beautifully articulated, if we think of it as an upgrade and we think of this transition as being something that is imbued with power and
Ah, mm,
growth,
mm.
what a cool idea that we just keep learning about ourselves and we keep discovering, and there's all this room to continue to contribute and explore. I just think that's really, really neat.
Yeah, 100%. I absolutely love that too. And it's true. And it's with intention, right? We need to seek that out. That reminds me of a passage that I've earmarked as well, because we said we'd talk about a couple of passages. Who will we be?
That's
Has
what I'm literally open to. That's
no.
where I dog-eared my page.
Oh, that's too funny. Go on. Yeah. So it's, um, yeah, I just find that it's yeah, it talking about who we want to become and living our next phase of life with intention is really, really important. Not to just let each day kind of turn into the next and not have I don't like using the word goals, but having a vision or an
Sense of
idea of what.
purpose.
Pardon?
Sense of purpose.
Yeah, sense of purpose. Yeah, what does that look like? What do I see myself doing? Future me. We always talk about future me. It is that becoming, and our identities do change in this phase. And what I also appreciate about this book is that Luann's background is in biology, neuroscience, psychiatry. So she's got this wonderful melding and bringing together of different aspects of who we are and our bodies, and it's making that body brain connection that's really important. That's what strikes me about this book. Probably, second to the language shift, is I think it's really important that we can appreciate the conversations that are happening now. Thank God we're talking about menopause more and more. A lot of it is related to symptoms. if you've got one of these 35 or more of them, one of these 35 symptoms, then you are potentially in perimenopause, the transition, as Louann calls it. And that's all great. That's really good to get the heads up on that. But as Lisa Mosconi, who is somebody else I'd like to do a book review on, she's done a hell of a lot of research on the female brain and is probably the world's leading expert on it now, given the very focused research she's done. Both of them are saying that really what we're feeling, this is a brain response. Often when we think about hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, we think of our reproductive organs, and it's very much, what's happening down there in a physiological sense. But really, our symptoms and the changes that we feel, it's a brain response. And appreciating that, I think, reframes our approach to aging with power as well. Our hormones, the reason our hormones' purpose is to incite some sort of behavior. That's what our hormones do. So a lot of what we're feeling and how we move through this next phase of life is about our behaviors, and how we handle the change and how our behaviors change during that as well. So, for instance, we know medically it's really hard to know, from a blood test point of view, whether you are in the transition or the upgrade, right? Because it's unreliable. Our hormones, especially in the transition, are doing this up and down, roller coaster. So it's pretty unreliable to get a blood test on your hormone levels, to rely on that alone to determine where you are in the whole scheme of things. But I'm wondering, Erica, if we started to appreciate that what we're feeling is actually a brain response, a behavioral response in all of this, whether that would be more of a clue as to where we are in that transition or the upgrade, if we started to be in tune more to how we're feeling and the behaviors that we're exhibiting.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I shall keep that in mind as I continue through that phase. Yeah, that's really interesting. And it is a very different way of thinking about it. I think, despite what we know about the brain body connection, for the most part, the way that we think about it and talk about it still tends to distinguish between the two as though they're separate things. And that just simply isn't true. But I think even anyone who has dealt with, PMS, that there's your very, very clear evidence that your hormones are affecting your brain and, resulting in certain sorts of behavior that often feels so out of your control. So we know this, but how we talk about it, what we do with that, obviously really makes a difference. Um, Shall I read a little bit from that "Who will you be"
Yes.
passage?
Yes,
Yeah.
please do.
I love that we both earmarked that. So I'm going to just start partway down the page, but she says, "But now is the time to ask yourself, who do you want to be today? Who do you want to be in your transition and beyond? You have decades ahead of you following the reproductive phase of life. Who do you want to be as you enter the fullness of your age? Is it a leader, an artist, a visionary, a mentor and sponsor? Is it a life filled with freedom, purpose and focus, unencumbered by the responsibilities of an earlier time? These are some of the desires I hear from women. I am obsessed with how they answer this question and how the transition and freedom from the fertility cycle helps us in forming a new self-image, discovering our authentic selves and realizing our new opportunity."
Yeah, love that. It's exactly what I highlighted. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important and empowering. And makes she talks about that a lot in the book. This whole, and again, it's a reframing and understanding why we act the way we do and do what we do in different phases of our life. So in that fertility phase, which is when we are, she calls it looking for the right sperm. It is all about attracting a mate, right? Because at the end of the day, we are the human species, and whether we choose to or not, we are here to reproduce. We're wired for reproduction. So that's really interesting. Appreciating that as we transition from that fertility phase, from, into say our 20s and 30s into the transition, which is, sort of, I guess, mid 30s through to early 40s, that's we behave very differently. You can feel the change happening within you, and she often says that when we're talking about the fertility stage of our life, that's where we deliberately, dress a certain way to attract, certain partners, and we, want to feel sexy and be sexy, and put a lot of effort into how we look to attract that mate. And as our hormones change and shift, and we move from that fertility phase when we're not dropping eggs, like we used to, that changes. Our behaviors change, and our focus is less and less about how we look and feel in that regard, to expressing things in a different way and being more potentially true to ourselves and what's expected. Uh,
Mm.
and I think that's, I've had conversations and read conversations about this where for some women, and she talks about this in the book too, that's a struggle, like, and we get those messages of anti-aging and, make sure you don't have the wrinkles and the grey hair and you've got to try and look as you were in your 20s. Off. Seriously, like, I'm not in that phase anymore and I don't need to fight it, but to try and hang on to that and bring that through the transition,
Mm.
that's the conflict, and where it could be really challenging and difficult for us. Instead of just appreciating that I'm not in my fertility phase anymore, I'm going into a new phase. It's a fantastic phase. There's some struggle in between in the transition, but on the other side, girlfriend, it's clear sailing and it's a beautiful thing.
I think you just hit on something so profound.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that
Tell
that whole tension that you sort of just described between entering a new phase, but sort of almost like society telling you you've still got to hang on to what you had. I think that's massive. I'm sort of sitting there and my brain just started to clock through that. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually a big thing because that I wonder how that impacts a whole bunch of different things. Um, I'm starting to notice that more and more, like amongst my peers, and
Yeah.
um, I'm probably one of the few people that I know, kind of in my immediate circles, who has let my hair. It's really hard to see on screen, but like
Mm,
it's
mm,
really grey. Um, who doesn't I don't do any of those things. I've never done spray tans. I've never done all these sorts of things to change my appearance, but I've felt the pressure for sure.
mm.
Um, and yeah, I think you've hit on something. I don't know what else to say about it, but I think that's a really significant um, tension point for people, both maybe during to the transition and potentially even after, where society says one thing, but your body and your hormones say
And
maybe something
another.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that, yeah, we might have to revisit that as a topic and see what we can find about that because that's pretty big. Um, I know that you, having read all of the book, not just one third, um, perhaps have a passage to read from further in the back. Would you like to read us a little something
Yeah.
from it, or just talk a little bit more about a future chapter?
Yeah. Look, what I've highlighted with all the blue bits here is it's towards the end of the book. Luann talks about, a new focus and um the stages of the upgrade
Mm,
as you transition through it. And
mhm,
I've got my notes here. She mentions 6 stages, and I'll just talk to them very quickly. The first stage is the battle with the demons of appearance, and that's what we've just talked about, out of the fertility years. The second is sex becomes an afterthought. With declining estrogen and testosterone as well. That can often be a source of conflict in relationships as well. And I would really like us to go down the rabbit hole with that a bit
Mhm.
more in future episodes here on the podcast as well. Stage 3, nothing left to lose. And that is facing loss and change. And that's a big one, right? Because we think of loss as in terms of grief and death, right? But as we've spoken about before in the podcast, in change, you experience loss. And in this stage, in the transition and the upgrade, we experience major change. So being able to work with that and appreciate that is really huge.
Mm.
Underline, underscore, bold, whatever, highlight that. Um, Stage 4, and relates to 5 as well, is facing the monster under the bed. And that's really talking about death anxiety. The fact that we don't talk about death much in our Western society, and other cultures they do. But it really is, the big hairy monster that we don't often talk about. But hello, we've gone there before in the podcast because we both believe that it's an important conversation to have, and repeatedly. And then her stage 5 is facing the dying brain and body. So that's really, in the throes of dying, really, and what does that look like, and how do we change physiologically with that, and also neurologically as well. And she talks about, in the book particularly, uses an example of and the reason why it struck a chord with me, because this is my personal experience. I lost my dad in February this year, and I'm one of 4. And she spoke of a family of 4 gathering around their parents' bed as they were dying. And we never left Dad's side. We were on a roster. My brother, bless him, slept there in the chair next to Dad at night because he didn't want Dad to die alone. But what can happen, and this is our experience, is that there's a whole lot of extra stimulation that goes on for them as you tell them how much you love them, and you hold their hand and you stroke them. There's all of that stimulation going on, and that makes it hard for them to go and to let go. So as we're trying to hang on and thinking that we're helping them through, in some ways we might be prolonging and making it more difficult for them to go. And within half an hour of us leaving Dad, we got the message that he'd passed.
Mm.
So it very much a personal experience. So she talks about death like that.
Mm.
Then stage 6 is planning for a good death. So 3 of her 6 stages really evolve around death, talking about leading up to it, planning for it, and the death experience. So yeah, look, that's a big part of the end of the upgrade. That's where it ends for all of us. So again, it's a mindset shift and a reframe
Mm.
around the changes that we experience. Yeah. So that was
Yeah.
something that struck me, with the stages she talked about.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And it's interesting, I when we started this conversation, I said I've just come out of a lecture and it was about grief.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and there was a book recommended during the lecture called Staring at the Sun. And I don't know why, I just thought I'd mention that because it's apparently supposed to be phenomenal. But I think that also speaks to, and I don't know if she talks about this in the book, but it speaks to maybe why the transition can be such a frightening time, because
Mm.
there is that sense of where we're heading.
I'm
And
closer. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I like that she covers that, and I didn't actually know that that was coming. So thank you for that
Pleasure.
preempting. Um, yeah, I mean, who would you recommend reads this, Anita? Like in terms of stage. So like, me being very early perimenopause, um, like yes. Is it still kind of really valid and worthwhile to read if you are already upgraded? Like what are we
Yeah.
thinking?
Oh,
Yeah,
totally. Yeah, because it shines a light on giving you clues as to what you might be experiencing. So you appreciate that you're not alone. And if you,
yeah,
because in the book, the power of the book as well is that she uses a lot of personal stories, real life stories. The power of personal stories comes through. So it's powerful. It's the theory and the practicals. It's a real, yeah. So I think anyone, in their 30s through to, God, 80s, 90s,
Anyway.
80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think it has a lot of relevance
Cool.
and is just a damn good read, and one that I would absolutely say should be a must read for any woman, and even a man who's interested,
Yeah.
appreciate what's going on in his partner's world.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So, oh, good.
Brilliant. So yes, highly, highly recommended. The Upgrade. I love it.
Yeah. And I just want to finish off too, Erica, that in the show notes, I will put references to our previous podcast episodes, because in those 6 stages that Louann talked about for the upgrade, we've got most of those covered in the podcast
Yes, we
previous.
do.
We do, yes. Absolutely no clue that. I mean, we approached it very differently, but it's good to know that it's
Mm.
as important information and conversations to have. So I'll definitely do that. And she also talks about muscle health and how leg strength is an indicator of cognitive health. Because, as men, Alzheimer's is, most of us will suffer that more than men as we age. Dementia is now the number one killer of women in Australia, and I believe in other Western civilizations as well. So, yeah, it's a big thing, a big topic. But muscle strength is an indicator of cognitive strength because of the muscle brain connection. That's really, really.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about that currently in Midlife Unfiltered. So I'll put a link to that.
Midlife Mojo, do you mean?
Oh, Midlife Mojo. We are Midlife Unfiltered. Yeah, Midlife Mojo. Too many midlife.
Yeah. Well, do you know what I'm just thinking too? Like when you said that, I mean, this is actually not a particularly big book.
No.
Like, so, the amount of stuff that we've just talked about having been covered, it's covered in like, it's not even 300 pages. Well, it's about 300 pages. Like, it's not, this is not a hefty kind of, despite the fact that I've only made my way through a third, it's not a hard read, and it's not a, huge, like it's not a medicalized text or anything like that. So I think that's something to mention too, is that despite the fact that there's a lot in there, it's actually really quite a simple read in a lot of ways, in the sense that it's not a lot to get through.
Yeah, that's a good
Manageable.
point. Yeah, it's very practical, easy to read, and I use it as a ready reference. Like we said, Atlas of the Heart with Brene Brown. We
Yes.
both go back to that again and again. That's why I go back to this book again and again,
Yes.
because I find it's a ready reference, because there are so many gems in it. I feel like in a way we've only just scraped the surface in this book review episode, because there is so much in there. So do yourself a favor and grab a copy
Go buy it.
of The Upgrade by Dr. Louann Brizendine. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, not sponsored. Just
Not
gotta buy.
sponsored, no. Just want the word to get out there, because we want women to live this next phase of their life with power and purpose. Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. Love it.
Erica?
Thank you, Anita. It's been a pleasure. I'm going to go off to my next lecture. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. I'm off
And
to
thank
write.
you. You're off to what?
Right.
Right. Oh, well, wonderful. And to everybody watching live or on the replay, thank you for joining us. It's always such a delight to know that you're tuning in. Let us know if you've got questions. Let us know if there's a book you think we should read, because I've got a running list. I might read a third, but that's okay. We'd love to hear your ex. So shoot us a message. But we'll be back next week. Yeah.
We will. Absolutely. Thanks,
All
everyone.
right.
Thanks,
See you
everyone.
soon. Bye.